Obonna Esi. Professor Obonna is the Dean, School of Environmental Sciences, Babcock University. Let's appreciate Professor. The title of his paper is Equitable Land Stewardship, Challenges of Land Administration and its Impact on Climate Change and Community Rights. I also like Professor Titi Dugori from the Estate Management Department, University of Jos, to come and join the professor to the high table. Professor Titi Dugeri. His paper title is Transparency and Accountability in Land Governance, a must for adaptation to climate change and community rights in Africa. Also to join on to the high table is the Director Environmental Assessment Department in the Federal Ministry of Environment, Mrs. Rofikatu Odetero. Director, she's going to discuss on economic analysis of sustainable land use practice for climate change mitigation. Welcome, Director. The next person to be on the high table is Esteseveyo Ojikutu Olawale, is the Director, Acquisition, Revocation, and Compensation Lagos State Lands Bureau Office. Is he here? Okay, you're welcome, sir. His paper is Community Right and Land Governance. You're all welcome. Let me now invite Professor Obonna to take the first lead. Professor, sir. Sorry, sir. Excuse. Hello.
What's the time limit?
10 minutes position. 30 minutes.
Good morning, all. Good morning, all. I wish to thank the organizers of this program for putting this together and for asking some of us to participate. I thank you for the invitation. The Master of Ceremony has already established the protocol which I want to appropriate. I also want to say that I just hope you will not be disappointed, because I thought I wasn't going to speak again. In fact, I think I shouldn't be speaking except that it will be a breach of protocol. The simple reason is that all that needs to be said, as a matter of fact, has been said. right from the address of the director to the Honorable Minister himself. However, I would like to share a few thoughts with you. And usually, I like my sessions to be interactive. Land stewardship is a critical subject matter. And let me apologize to the organizers because I had to modify what I'm presenting a little bit. Particularly because the major components of the theme are quite heavy, whether it is stewardship, whether it is equity, or community rights, or climate change. They are all in themselves big time. Can you see my slide? Can we go to slide 1, the menu? Incidentally, we've had tea break. I don't know what we were served, but I'm sure the organizers gave us a menu, so that's the menu I'm serving. Next slide. I'm particularly happy and impressed that everybody we have here represents one government organization or the other. Here, generally, we use the term MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies. But all of us, all of you work for government. And we know that a major function of government is protection. Most times we think about protection of life, particularly because of our circumstance here in Nigeria in most recent times. But we also talk about protection of property. And that is because life and property go together. That's actually how God made us. Because in Eden, after creation, God handed over to our first parents the Garden of Eden to tend. So as a matter of fact, real estate was the first job that was given to man. Now, protection of life and property, top citizens concern, and I'm sure everybody in this hall, and most Nigerians will agree with me. Incidentally, life and property cannot manifest or be enjoyed except within the environment, and that is land. Particularly when we define land in all these ramifications as not just the S-cross, not just the surface, but whatever is permanently fixed on it and around it. And that's why we can talk about, territorial integrity. We talk about national airspace, and you wonder why, based on international laws, that is part of the land of a country. So we can see that because of the importance of land policies and institutions that manage land are very important in any economy. As a matter of fact, literature has shown that in Africa, we are really in trouble because our challenges are multiplying, partly because we are not doing enough. So in Africa, we have a challenge of population, we have a challenge of urbanization, our agriculture is in trouble, and we've not been able so far, notwithstanding the numerous programs, been able to transform our rural areas properly. And why? A number of things are not going well, including the rise of different genders and interest groups. Slide. Yeah. Again, the importance of property or land. Research shows that 40 to 60% of households' assets are generally in terms of property. Whether it is properly titled, whether it is properly recognized, is immaterial. That means we need effective and efficient management of land and stewardship with the appropriate policies and practices. It's not sufficient to have the rules made. It's necessary that the rules are effected. Of course, government, like I said, all of us here work in one capacity or the other on behalf of government. So we function on behalf of government. So government works through agents and stewards. And you may wonder, any difference? But the important thing is that whether you're an agent or a steward, you're supposed to be able to account for the totality of what has been entrusted to you and to do so fairly. So we can talk about why it's important to seriously think about managing the land that God has given us. Land stewardship is of interest to every Dick and Harry. And that is because environmental challenges are topmost, particularly these days. Hardly these days will you turn on this news and you not hear about flood, hear about earthquakes, fire, and all that. So these are all environmental challenges. But for us here, the challenges that we want to talk about are relevant and as put together by the organizers of this conference is those of equity, community rights, and climate change. Like I said before, even these three, each of them is big enough to make a conference. So why do we have to do proper stewardship? It is only through that we can develop and grow our economy. Again, it is tied with citizens' rights, their lives, and livelihoods. So, as MDAs, we have a role, whether it is MDA for the federal government or the state or the LGAs, or even other land operators, we have a critical role to play. And that critical role encompasses, we have to identify, understand, mitigate, and then try to ameliorate these challenges using our policies and practices. Because MDAs work for government, we say they're agents or stewards. However, once the law has been made, for instance, the laws establishing the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, that same law empowers the ministry to make some subsidiary regulations. So you can see the function of an NDA goes beyond just what the law has said. And that is where discretion and reasonableness and fairness come into play. But for us, we think MDAs should rather function as stewards. You'll discover that the tree break we've just had, everybody is feeling a little better. After breaking your fast, I don't know if you've done so, but researchers have told us that after 6 hours, you should be needing another food. So if you work very early in the morning, this tea break will have filled some gaps. So the stewards have done us a good job. Can we give them a round of applause? So we prefer that MDAs, land managers, perceive themselves as stewards. Simply because, yes, in a sense, they are agents, but if you follow the principal-agent law and relationship strictly, the agent is just there for his own. I don't know if you have that. Yes. You can see that drawing. The principal hires the agent serves the principal. But most agents will not go beyond their mandate to benefit the principal. It's not usual. But for a steward, can we have the next one? You can see the steward is using both hands comfortably, loyally, dealing with people of different circumstances on behalf of the principal. That is what our MDAs should be doing. So the steward is loyal to organizations, objectives, things long term in terms of his service. And of course, in some instances, still has to serve those with whom he or she does not have contractual relationship, such as third parties. So our MDAs should be more of stewards running the principal-steward relationship. If we must move beyond where we are, if I'm sure all of us listen to the minister, in the Bible we have a book of the Bible called Lamentations. For me, it sounded like Lamentations. It looks like we are doing so much, but we're not getting enough. So can we now focus and zero in on the core of this discussion, land? How did we come about land? There are two major views. Those who believe that God created. I'm one of them. Those who believe in the Big Bang Theory. I want to believe that a number of us will do ourselves a lot of good if we go and take a little time and look at the Big Bang Theory. You discover that even scientists themselves are confused. Notwithstanding the mathematical superiority exhibited by mathematical models, even the Einstein's model is unable to explain the source of life. But if you go to Genesis 1:1, God said, let there be dry land. You notice the creation story. For each day, God created an environment, and then during the second phase, he populated it. And that's why we are comfortable on this planet. And once those parameters fluctuate, we complain, and that's what we call climate change. Now, land is seen in different ways. Some people see it in terms of space. You know, when we talk about facilities management, oftentimes, as professionals, we do not tend to advert our minds to space being a facility. So the dimensional or natural space is one way people see land. Some see land in terms of spiritual beliefs. That we can say much later. Some see land as a human interaction. That is why we can talk about communities and community rights. And some see it as a source of production. We have a land equation, a very simple land equation, and says that human life and civilization is the numerator, whereas the environment, land, and the climate around it carries that life and civilization. Otherwise, we won't survive. Researchers have generated a number of theories to say how land is used, reused, transacted. But if you look at those details, they seem to be saying one and the same thing in terms of their being similar, looking at land from different perspectives and making it contextual. One other thing that we may not consciously think about, Go into history, check most of the wars that have been fought. There's hardly any of them that had nothing to do, that didn't have something to do with space, with land, with territory. Name it. So land is important. And land is important not for itself, but because we use land to do something. We need it. It's derived demand, like economists will tell us. Incidentally, based on the equation we had, it means we can't do anything without land. That is why we see that the most critical factor of production. So who owns the land? Do we have any South Africans here? Or somebody who's been to South Africa recently? Fine. For those of us who are my age, can you remember the number sung by Sonny Okosun? Papa's Land. Who owns the land? Who owns the land? This is somehow related to the spiritual perception of land. Some see land as a spirit, like the South Americans would think so, and say, sorry, you can't own land. You can't own a spirit, because the spirit rather owns you. So, community rights, don't forget, is hinged on ownership. Even though for real estate professionals and lawyers, you may tweak and split hairs, trying to generate a few differences. So it's important when we are managing land as stewards to look again at tenure. The Honorable Minister had talked about some reforms and all that. Incidentally, he's not here, so I won't ask the questions I had wanted to ask. As we go down in the paper, you realize a few things which we need to begin to do sincerely if we must get our land management in order. Because we need a good policy, laws, governance framework, particularly the political will to do what needs to be done. And while we are doing that, part of that political will is in terms of collaboration. If, for instance, we are going to adjust rates for compensation for crops or for development on land, we must be able to sit together and determine who is in the best position to generate that value. And for me, if you ask me, I think it should be a collaborative effort. All stakeholders need to come together. We listen to ourselves and be able to get to a middle road such that the administrators will be happy doing their job, the recipients, the communities, and property owners will also be happy. And don't forget, it's one system that we're running. When the property owner is unhappy, it reflects on everything that has to do with that property, including the revenue government generates from that property. That is why in a place like Abuja and some other places, you see developments that are just locked, wasting, not generating money. And of course, sometimes a government wakes up and says, okay, land rent, backlog. I think the minister made an allusion to something like that. And you ask yourself, this land rent you are charging, what has the owner of the property benefited? What has the ownership of that property imputed into the economy positively? And that is why land management, one of the reasons why land management is important. So we need to focus on governance framework and the climate change and its impact. When we talk about climate change, some people get turned off. But it's a reality that we have to deal with, because man keeps producing for survival. So we have that figure there. You can see a factory. You can see a skyscraper. What is at the base of that skyscraper? Can you suggest? What does it look like? Water. Sorry, I asked if some people came from South Africa. Did anybody come in from the US? Florida? Now we don't want to go there because they are having flood. You know, sometimes I imagine how benevolent God is. If these things were happening here, maybe they wouldn't have anywhere in the news. Community rights, world community. But because it's happening there, I mean, you just have to hear it. But the truth remains, when the roof comes down, whether you're tall or short, does it matter? As a matter of fact, when you talk about climate change, it is the developed economies that have put us in the place where we are. And that is why even recently, more recently, you hear the government of the president and his team trying to negotiate the energy protocol. They will want us to stop our fossil fuels immediately and rather get handouts from them. Meanwhile, they have used these several years to use their own fossil fuels and still have them. They are using other means to generate energy. At the end of the day, the developed countries are generating more challenges that are affecting climate change than the developing economies. So what we mean by climate change is that interaction between the elements and humans such that the temperature of the planet begins to be adjusted, begin to be altered. And once that happens, it's a signal that a number of other things are affected. One is the carbon dioxide value around us. If you look at the picture below the building, you see that looks like a tornado. So when we talk about climate change, those of us, of course, for you to have studied this environment, economics is compulsory. You may have also done geography. I still remember what my teacher taught us. Definition of climate as average weather for at least 35 years, or we'll say a long period. Whereas weather is the atmospheric condition, temperature, rainfall, and all that. Given the nature of the climate itself and the level of variability, the truth remains that climate change is a very complex and indeterminate phenomenon. And as a person, I don't blame the scientists for their inability, simply because we didn't create the world. We didn't make the elements. So whatever we do as scientists is just an attempt to manage what we have. So if you go through the climate research outputs, you see a number of contradictions or wrong estimates. But like I say, it's not their fault. It also generates a lot of debate for several reasons. For instance, we talked about rising temperature of about 1.5 degrees above what it used to be. And the developed world is saying, everybody go electric. And we are saying, yes, we'll go electric, but not at the same rate as you. Again, you need to give us some money or invest in our environment, because what you're doing in your place is also affecting us. So, like I said, it's a complex interaction about everything that God has created and imbued us with, endowed us with on the planet. Whether it is the air, the land itself, the water bodies, all are involved. And one sure index is the temperature. And we know, particularly for those in biology, what temperature does to protein. Once there's no power, everybody begins to complain. And when it gets too hot, we can begin to have wildfires. Vegetation begins to dry up and die. Even water itself. I know some few years back, South Africa ran into a problem of water. And I remember somebody asking me, how come South Africa will be talking about water when they are just on the coast? And I remember asking the person, why don't you go and ask Job? Because that's the only man who has been able to live with the fish in the water. So only him will know how the best method for desalinization of water, seawater. So what we are saying is that as we think and talk and write about land management, land stewardship, we must be careful with human activity or inactivity, because of the impact on the elements, particularly carbon dioxide. Now you see one word here, sequestration, simply meaning reducing the volume of carbon dioxide in the air. You know, God is so merciful that he created the vegetation for us, such that when we generate carbon dioxide, the plants take it. They generate oxygen, we take. Complete cycle. So once that balance is messed up, climate change begins to happen. And again, human activity in terms of the built environment, construction, mining, drilling, and the rest tend to help us deforest our environment to the point where we become endangered. So, when we're talking about climate change, there are two major things we should be looking at: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation, because you intervene to minimize the impact. Adaptation, because we cannot do anything. Therefore, we begin to think about things. Electric vehicles, for instance, can be seen as a form of adaptation. Not printing every piece of paper if you don't need it is a way. Recycling your water and other materials is also a way. But oftentimes when these issues come up, we think they are left only for scientists or for manufacturers. And of course, again, we can make wealth through those materials. The impact is mostly on humans in terms of how we feel the ambient environment, our food production, and animal health. Even your built environment. This morning I noticed that there was a time, I think the director got some people to do some adjustments here, cleaning, and you wonder, this leather in an enclosed environment, how can it be dirty? Because our environment is dirty and the air carries it all over the place. Now, we've talked about land vegetation cover as being important in our fight, in our quest to either mitigate climate change or adapt to it. And that is where we come into managing the land, stewardship. I'm not sure I need to talk again about stewardship, having used the tea break as an example. However, we need to note that once we are talking about self-interest in terms of what we do with what we are entrusted as a resource, as a mandate on behalf of others, then we're talking about stewardship. Simply stated, responsible use of resources. And here, we're talking about responsible use of land. Of course, it is a major component in the SDGs, 17 SDGs. And as far as I'm concerned, every SDG can be linked to land management, simply because everything that humans do is done on land. Again, the available space, even though economists have told us that land is inelastic in the long run, it is also not the entire land that God has given us that we have access to. We only deal with about 3/4 of it. So we need to pay attention to environmental stewardship. And again, that is where the MDAs and all of us come in. We had tried to say earlier that MDAs, just like as the Honorable Minister have moved on, we are still here. This meeting is still holding based on that mandate that the ministry has given for this conference to hold. But the specific things we do here cannot be controlled by the Honorable Minister. That is a critical component in stewardship. And that is why we say that MDAs are semi-autonomous. There are things MDAs do that nobody can directly compel them or determine how they do it. So, as stewards, the ultimate objective of the organization of our mandate is important and should be uppermost as we manage land. Stewardship, to some people, seen in terms of ethics, morality. Others look at it in terms of what motivates the steward. Again, go back to the agent and steward relationship, agent principal and principal steward relationship earlier. For us, we think that for you to have good stewardship, a number of things get involved. You have to have the knowledge, and that goes with capacity. You have to have the humility of being human by taking care. Then you have to put yourself in the role as a steward, as an agent, simply saying you're working on behalf of somebody else, not just the man who has sent you on the job, but also to the person receiving the job. That is why we can talk about community rights. And here again, we need to differentiate between rights and freedoms, but that is not for today. So, when we talk about land stewardship, we are looking at the utility value of the concept. It helps us in productivity and sustainability. And just for your interest, oftentimes when we talk about sustainability, the tendency is to look at the definition or concept generated by the World Forum, Economic World Forum, some years back. But for me, to make sustainability effective, we should additionally be thinking about sustainability in terms of repeatability. In other words, we should be able to do the same thing again and again and increasing efficiency, improving on each turn, so that over time there will be general improvement in the economy and development. There are factors that influence stewardship. I've mentioned them in passing. The steward has to be properly motivated. That is a major difference between a steward and an agent. That steward has to have the capacity. Part of that capacity is what is happening now, interacting with people, sharing knowledge, imbibing, learning, and unlearning. Another aspect of capacity is resources, equipment, office space, organizational structure, funding, the environment of work, including ergonomics in the offices. All these will help motivate the steward to act as a true steward, not as an agent. At the end of the day, stewardship has to get some results. Those results can be social, they could be cultural, they could be economic, it could be in terms of health, could be physical, and of course, governance related. A number of things influence how you become and function as a steward. Incentives, the norms we have agreed or by which we have brought up. Again, I've mentioned resources in terms of whether you depend on somebody else and how long you depend on that person for that resource with which to do your job. The access you have to it and rights. A number of things can be used to gauge whether stewardship is working. We call them metrics. What do you get as a result of your stewardship? What consequences coming up? Intended and unintended. Are there benefits? If yes, are they limited to what you have in mind, or are you planning to have extra benefits? At what cost are you serving? What initiatives are you bringing to bear? And that takes us to another challenging component. Are we talking about equity or equality? Because in serving, you serve different. Remember the picture we had where the steward was using his arms to carry the three people of different colors. So which means their needs are different. So while you're serving, as a steward, we must balance out the circumstance. You can see the picture we have there. Everybody on the left is equal, the same base, minimum wage. Sorry, I'm not talking about 70,000. The same base. But is that fair? If you think it's fair, is that circumstance or condition likely to produce the result you're looking for in the short, medium, and long term? So the left looks more like equality, whereas the right looks more like equity. We're achieving the same goal for everybody, taking into consideration their different circumstances. I will not bore you with the literature details, how to move from equality to equity comes about. Of course, again, it involves economics, because at the end of the day, We are talking about what I put in and what I get out of it. My perception of those. Just like the next person, we also think about what is he or she is putting in compared to what he or she is getting in comparison with myself or another person. So, whereas before now, we use equity in terms of labor relations, equity has now got into the development discourse because it has to do with justice, it has to do with inputs, it has to do with outcomes, it has to do with rewards, and at what cost, like I said. In simple terms, when you talk about equity, like I've tried to explain, we are looking at how do I maximize my rewards. But again, we should begin to go away from maximization and rather towards optimization. And that is because maximization has a market capitalist tendency. And economists have shown that markets never give what is fair. And that is why people have criticized the idea of equity, as we can see there. But what we're saying is that for you to have equity, the condition of each person that is different by any means must be taken into account in order to be able to be fair and be just, and as well as maintain and return human dignity. And if we have to be fair, just, and have people maintain their God-given dignity, it means we are looking at the composition of the community. What are the rights of community members? A community can be in terms of space, like the community of the Federal Capital Territory. Here we have a community of Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. Basically, we have something in common to be a community. And it means that as we serve as land stewards, we must be conscious of the different and several publics or communities we serve, being conscious of their peculiarities. Because at the end of the day, if you think he or she or they don't matter, someday they will matter. Because we are talking about land. And don't forget the concept of who owns the land. Because land was not made by any one of us. Even if you are the person who signs the CFO on behalf of the governor, you did not make the land. You did not produce the land. So we need, at the end of the day, to try to understand the basic components or concept of a land. I'm rounding up now. Stewardship, we've done that. Equity, we've done that. Community rights, and climate change. Again, protecting life and property is what we have mandated government to do for us on our behalf, because it's a major concern to citizens and everybody. And the only way we can survive is on this planet. Therefore, we need to manage the environment well. To do that, land policies and practices and institutions are critical. Because like I said, the free market concept never delivers what we think it will. MDAs are more of stewards of government. And when we talk about government, all of us are government, so they are stewards. our policies, our practices should be such as to help us ameliorate the negative impacts of our environmental variations. Of course, there are many concepts and theories for climate change, but at the end of the day, the truth is that the elements are changing too fast that we need to be more careful. For us, we suggest, most humbly, that government MDAs should try to get involved in best practices, get digital. I'm happy the Honorable Minister talked about digitalization. For the land registry in particular, we should begin to talk about what we call distributed ledgers, like the blockchain. It will help a lot in minimizing most of the challenges we have, whether it is fraud, whether it's valuation, transfers, because when you use a blockchain or a distributed ledger, everything everybody does is in the open. When anything changes, everybody knows it has changed. If you want to pick up a property, you have basis to, on your own, determine its status so that fraud is minimized. If you ask me, my suggestion is that government land MDAs should serve more as stewards, not just as agents. I hope I have served you as a good steward. Thank you.
Let's appreciate Professor Ogbonna once again. That was the lead paper presentation. I'm looking at the time. We are already behind schedule. Do we take the question and answer now for this paper, or we take the second paper? That are the two papers. We'll now take the questions. So participants, take your questions. Just jot down your question for this first paper. Let us quickly take the second paper. Thereafter, we now address them together. So may I now invite the next paper presenter, Professor Titi Dugeri, from the Estate Management Department, University of Jos. The title of his paper is Transparency and Accountability in Land Governance, a Must for Adaptation to Climate Change and Community Rights in Africa. So raise your hand for the professor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Permit me to adopt the protocols ably established by the MC. Professors are not good at protocol. So I say good afternoon. Thank you for the slide. My topic is talk on transparency and accountability. I am supposed to give you an overview of what's happening on the African continent. The next. So we look, that's the basic outline for my discussion. If you have my paper, probably you can look at it, but maybe we'll talk more to the paper than what you're holding in the paper. I may not have all the statistics to give you in that paper you're holding, but we can talk about them as I raise them here. The reason is very simple. There is a lot of work that has been done on tenure, land management systems in Africa, but we also were aware that these studies have been carried out with different perspectives of those who were involved in them. We'll look at what I think is suitable for this purpose. Land, like we know, is a basic resource, even for those economies that are into the fourth industrial revolution. These are economies that are no longer so dependent or claim not to be so dependent on the earth. But I can tell you that we have yet, even when we're going to go to space, the shuttle must be launched from the earth. And when the mission is accomplished, the shuttle must also what? Come back to earth. So land, whether we agree or not, remains a basic and universal resource. Not just for us in Africa, who are wholly agrarian, but for just every part of the world. So it's not by accident that all societies of the world have had to agree right from time immemorial how to arrange among them how land is going to be assessed and used. Since the day man ceased to be a wanderer. I'm sure you can know that's a long time. And these began like, these are the things we can do, we cannot do, up to a point today where we have transcended or moved from just cultural beliefs to codes that govern land. And I can say that these things are even becoming global. The reasons why it's becoming global, I will explain subsequently. So it's not just what we were thinking in African societies where you had people who would say land can only be inherited patrilineally, or you say women cannot inherit, strangers or whatever. The world is converging. Tenure systems are assuming a global shape. So when we look at tenure systems, what you observe if you study them is that they are reflective of people's culture and custom and their political history. And so you will discover that this tenure system or these arrangements that are made are rarely static. They are always being refined. They are always being refined. Most pressing of the things that push this change that is constant is that society, the growth in population and changing aspirations will cause a modification. I refer people to a case that was concluded by the Supreme Court a few years back. I remember when that case was passed. We got talking with some colleagues who were from the eastern part of Nigeria, and they told me that maybe the Supreme Court will go and enforce it. It had to do with a lady who won a case that she could inherit, which is alien to the Igbo culture. But that's not about that case alone. We have systems in today where we have people coming to invest who are not even based in Nigeria. Companies are coming to invest. And they are pushing for individual ownership, taking us away from what we used to know, that land was communal, right? There is a popular quote to the chief of Odogbolo who said land belongs to a few who are living, many who are dead, and a lot more unborn. But those things have been vetoed, maybe not because we want it, but because of the growing population and the need for us to become a global community. Next slide. I don't want to take your time. I will explain a lot more when I need to explain, and we will move. So what is the issue with this, with the land governance that we want to be transparent and accountable. Now, governance is a very wide subject. It only assumed ascendancy around 1978 with the World Bank. There used to be somebody at the UN, I think they call him Boutros Ghali. He had a very radical approach, and he said, look, this thing we have left to nations, that we say it is what they want to do, let them do it. A time has come that we have to inquire into what people are doing. A lot of resources around the world were not being were not being used in the way to benefit or make for social and economic development. And a whole lot has passed like that. A case in point is the African states. Maybe let me start from there. We will remember, if you look at the structure of African tenure, land among Africans is basically communal. That's what we know. Along the line, we had colonialization. And when those people came here, they did things their way. At a particular point in our history, they left. Most African states become independent. Very shortly thereafter, those states were seized by military juntas. Right? And they were still part of the UN. And questions people asked was, if you so believe in governance, here we have people who are Kaki people. They don't believe in democracy. They do what they want to do. Why have you still allowed them to come and sit among you and talk when their people cannot inquire from them how they are governed? Their words are law. The very excuse they gave was to say, these countries are new, they are young, they have to be allowed to survive. It happened like that until Boutros Ghali said, no, what you do in your country does not concern you alone. His writings prompted the World Bank to inquire and publish. They wrote a book about governance, and they had to inquire how it is to be done. But the truth about it has been that governance as an issue has been there all along in all societies since time immemorial. However, the argument has been that people who so claim, who asked people what they were doing with power, because these were people who were mostly out of government, they were seen as disgruntled elements who would always want, we call them today opposition. So they will never see what is good in government. But that was not really their objective. They were only inquiring, what are you doing with the power we have given you to do? So there's always this distinction between government and governance, right? When you say government, you're talking about institutions that run the affairs of government. When you are talking about governance, you are inquiring into the processes, the power, how is it being exercised? For which reason we could have bad or poor governance and good governance. Now, transparency. When we say transparency, we are talking about the openness of a system. So if we're looking at processes, how open are these processes? To what extent do people know or have a say in if you are doing land administration, for instance, you are the custodian of land information, right? To what extent is that information you're processing open to the public? Because if you're not transparent, people cannot follow through what you are doing. and institutions will collapse. And then we will have the costly effects of not being transparent. Then accountability is not difficult to define because institutions are set up to operate. Power is vested in somebody to be used for a particular objective. We will be asking, how have you exercised that power? The people on whose behalf you're exercising that power, how much say do they have in the things that you do? So transparency and accountability are the two sides of governance. If governance must be good, then it has to be transparent. If it has to be transparent, it must be what? Accountable. So these go hand in hand. And community rights have been explained by the last speaker. But these rights are diverse. And those who manage land, they will have to mediate the diverse and competing interests of the constituents of society. Land is required not just by individuals and private corporates. Land is also needed by government for her activities. And each of these come to look for land or consume land with a different motive. Most times, these motives or these objectives are competing. Next slide. The minister mentioned the issue of compensation, which they are trying to work on. Society is segmented across different strata, and you will find that even among people that are supposed to be in the same group, there will be subgroups of those who are strong and those who are weak. We talk about the vulnerable people in our society today. We hear about women, the poor, and all the sort. So it's not even a one straight thing when you segment the constituents in a society for this purpose. So what is land management? I have a simple definition there that is very popular. The process by which land and resources are put to good effect. And then you will discover that these processes are worked by institutions with their frameworks. They make policy and they administer this policy. And it will follow that those institutions that administer land have enormous powers. So if that power is not used well, then that power could be corrupted. When institutions become weak, less transparent, and unaccountable to the people. Why is this an issue today? Why are we bothered with land governance issues? There have been emerged challenges. We have had rapid urbanization. Unfortunately, this is happening in the poorest parts of the world. We are told that we are over 8 billion people on Earth, right? Now, the most populated continent is Asia. They have 4.58 billion people. The next is Africa with 1.52 billion as of today. But if you look at the way resources of this world are distributed, or people have got capacity to manage their affairs better, the northern hemisphere, they have less of this population. Africa's population is growing at above 2%. Nigeria is growing at a rate of 2.3%, about the highest in the world. The other people have better capacity, better weight, better resource and technology, are even sliding into negative. Most countries in Europe and the US have less than 2% population growth. There's even a very big fear that places like Japan, Germany, Denmark, if they do not take steps, even China now is bothered, to reverse their very low rate of population growth, they may not be able to replace their population in under 20 years. Most of their people are senior citizens. Next slide. Next slide. Right. So, these are the issues that are pushing us to look at how we are doing things. In Africa, despite our burgeoning population, we have a lot of challenges, both social and economic. We have not been able to develop as we should. This is notwithstanding all the UN and world agencies' interventions. You will discover that the resources of the world are packed in Africa. Africa has about 60%, above 60% of the world's resources. Yet Africa remains the most undeveloped part of the world. So something must be wrong. I was checking, and you will discover that the UN have well over 15 bodies that are looking into our problems. And these issues were summarized. They will set agenda and say, okay, we will grow these people. At a particular level, they should be like this. The growth will not occur. You're all aware of the MDGs that were encapsulated courtesy of people from this part of the world, right? The MDGs, the timeline set was not achieved. After that, they were transformed into what? SDGs. We're talking about 2030. That was the set date. Today is 2024. We are 6 years away. UN Habitat is in Kenya. I don't know how far they have solved the housing problem. It was cited here to see how it can transform and get us out of that challenge. As I speak with you today, there are over 30 organizations globally that are working on tenure systems. Their focus is not other parts of the world. Their focus is Africa. Those who research, we hear about Land Porter, we hear about Jim, and a whole lot of them are like that. And these people, they are bothered because they are looking at the trouble that we can bring to the world. Besides the conflicts that have sent our people going to other parts of the world, you will discover that if there is any catastrophe today in the world, Africa will not survive. Coronavirus just passed us by. We were begging for a small machine to help us breathe. At that time, even those that were friendly felt that they will take care of themselves first before they can send those, what's the name of this machine? I just can't recall now. We couldn't find it. We couldn't find it. But it's logical when it comes to survival. Even on the plane, you are told to put your face mark first, right? Eh? If there is a certain loss of pressure while you are in the air, you are asked what? Help yourself what? before you can help a dependent. It's normal. That's the rule of survival. So that's the reason why you have a lot of people who are studying our tenure systems and seeing how we can get out. And that's why you've seen all those reports that we have the Property Transparency Index. You go and look at the rating. I didn't bother with statistics. We are not there. We are just not there. And we keep doing the same thing like my professor said, over and over. And I don't know when we'll get out of it. Climate change has brought to us here, about 20 years back, we've only seen all those tornadoes, all those heat waves happening in the northern hemisphere. Today in Nigeria, Lokoja can at any moment go underwater. As I was speaking today, 26 states have been put on the alert of flooding. Right? These things are real. They have come to us. Ironically, Africa contributes less than 5% of the pollution that is inducing this havoc. And we are required to adapt to climate change. And we'll talk about that subsequently. Now, another reason why there's been so much interest in governance, land governance on our continent, is that the human rights, when the UN was established, there was a Declaration of Human Rights charter, right? Which most countries subscribe to, Article 17, right? The right to property. And almost all countries that are signatories to that charter have in their constitution made provisions to protect what? Right to what? Property. However, due to weak and poor land governance on the African continent, you will discover that only the rights of a few are protected. And you hear people about pro land systems and things like that. All of that, whenever you see them, go and check. Is our continent or Asia? So something must be wrong. I agree. Between Africa and Asia, we hold 77% of the world's population. So that fact alone is significant to cause us challenges. Then the other part of it, why there is this clamor, it has to do with the self-felt need of African states to be part of a competitive world. We've heard about economic globalization, right? Right? Whether we like it or not, we have to pretend that we are good so that we can attract investors. Our presidents and those who rule the African continent are always running abroad to woo investors. Their practice out there is it's a tenure system that is private, individual driven. It is the basis of capitalization. You must have heard the minister talk about debt capital, the right to property of an individual. If they must come to us, then we must show how compliant, how global our systems look so that they can partake, be part of our economy. That's why I told you initially that tenure systems are assuming a global shape. Next slide. I jumped the historical background because I had initially talked about it. The systems are almost similar. There are differences, which has to do with political history, essentially. Political history. If you look at the Nigerian system, notwithstanding the regional differences, land was basically communal, right? When those people came here, they were not about building capacity. They were after Africa's resources. What did they do? Where they felt they can have access to what they need, they didn't touch the system. In fact, they imported their laws to enable their trading companies have access to land and those resources. That's what they did. All those land acts you see were imported from Britain. In the case of Nigeria, it happened elsewhere. Even in the French-speaking countries who adopted the process, the assimilation policy, nothing was really different. And when they left, those that took over after independence were in a hurry to develop. They never bothered with creating systems that were compact with us. They simply adopted what was there in the respective countries and continued. Two things pushed them. In the case of Nigeria, they wanted land for government to undertake development projects. That was the claim. And acquiring was being a problem, right? So land had to be nationalized. And that was what yielded the Land Use Act. That's what was the Land Use Act. It has come with some challenges, which we are managing till today. These problems of these countries is similar. For this reason, you discover that at one point, countries in Africa are undergoing reforms, depending on who was their colonial master. If you look at countries in the East, people that came there, they colonized them, but they came with their farmers, right? A lot of lands were expropriated from the locals. Zimbabwe is in trouble. It's a case in point today that they are fighting to get their lands back. How they went about it angered the world. In South Africa, the story is not the same. It's not different. The most fertile lands ended up in the hands of what? The white people, right? Right? In the West African state here, we don't have much of a trouble, except that we adopted what they came with and then pushed us to the background. So all over here in the West and some parts of Africa, we have a duality of tenure. The former system, where you have granted by government, and you have what? Customary. Other countries have taken the pains to recognize the customary tenure. In the case of Nigeria and many other countries, it is there on paper. It is there on paper. I'm not sure who amongst you here would desire a customary tenure. It's part reason why the lands are not registered. There's no incentive. There's no incentive. So, these initiatives that are being done, each last 2 years I was here, and I was also privileged to be part of discussions at the PTCLR. And there was so much admiration of the scores of Rwanda in land administration. They had achieved land titling for their country. And they did that in a very short space. And it became a model that was applauded without us looking at Rwanda as it is. Nigeria is a country of over 923,000 square meters. Rwanda measures just 23,000 square meters in size. Yes. We're a country of almost 230 million people. Rwanda's population is still less than that of Lagos State. Rwanda runs a unitary form of government. Nigeria is running a federal system. You heard the minister. He said they are doing the best they can, but they are having issues of mainstreaming, carrying along the sub-nationals. Right? Our own laws squarely put land management of the larger portion of the lands in this country in the hands of state governors. So basically, at the federal level, they can manage what belongs to them. When it comes to at the state level, they end up mainly acting in advisory capacity. They can, through what they do, show how a system should be run. That was the case of Felix. I'm happy the states have adopted GIS, but those states have not been able to transform the people who are supposed to run it. So what you see, besides the initial attempts to democratize land titling, a few steps down the lane, you will discover that it will revert. Because those same people who manage land in the way it never worked are still in charge. They have not been reoriented. So it's not about technology. Even that GIS issue, we discussed it 2 years ago. I raised issues. We loved it. We're going to embrace it. We didn't have capacity about the time to set up a technical group to specify what we needed that should be common and applicable to all the states. So what do we see? Nigeria is a big market. So all vendors trooped in with their systems. And the states, because they were acting individually, they acquired the GIS equipment that they wanted, defeating the goal that we should have been targeting. I should want, if it's going to be open, whatever is done in any state should be uploaded to a common platform which the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development can manage along with them, such that if I'm in Lagos and I want land in Kaduna, I don't really need to go to Kaduna. Interoperability and fusion of these systems, I don't know how they're going to do it. I wish they can achieve it. We have done that with the banking sectors, right? We have different banks, but once we were able to achieve BVN, all the banks can track you, right? A similar thing should obtain. In fact, people in Ghana who have been able to carry along their customary tenure are talking about moving to the next level of blockchain technology, bringing it into land admin systems to see how they can help their systems. They have their challenges, I must also confess. So you discover there's no political will. Institutions that are involved with land management are several. Here we are in Abuja. We have Aegis managing the land in the federal territory, right? Abuja is the federal capital, right? We have a federal Minister of Housing and Urban Development that's overseeing land elsewhere. You go down to the states, what do you see?
We're talking about, say, different laws. We have minerals. I didn't want to show pictures because initially I had pictures. If you see what is happening in Zamfara, that would have captured my topic clearly, but on a second thought, I removed them. But most of you must have seen the pictures of the mining sites in Zamfara. It's all over. It's all over. So, when you come to land, there are different agencies that are involved with land use, development, and you ask yourself, what have we put in place to enable that these agencies act in a way that is coherent with our set objectives? We have also a low level of acceptance. That is expected. The minister said less than 90% of the land is titled. I think less than 96%, I mean less than 4%. Less than 4%. The bulk of the land is in the rural areas, in the hands of the customary people, which we have yet to recognize. Huh? They have shadow titles. So, when we look at what they are doing, your policies are not going to be acceptable to them except you recognize their rights and give them a say in what you do. Funnily, when the government needs lands, what do? They will fall back on traditional title holders, right? Most times, they don't even get down to the people who actually own the land. And then they end up trampling the people through their title, particularly in the north. In the east and the west, I think they are more enlightened and they fight their things better. In the north, it's very pathetic, very, very pathetic. Then the cost of implementing reforms or taking these land admin systems to a level that we can think we're pushing things sometimes prove prohibitive. The cost can be very, very high. And when you have people or regimes that have different agenda, even where it started by their previous governments, it's abandoned. Most times, Africa relies on international donors and partners. So if you ask me, a very proud African, sometimes I feel that's insulting. The PTCLR could not proceed because there was donor fatigue. When James 3 ended, the program could not be funded. For those of us who participated in the last sessions, it was even difficult to host it. That should not be on account of the strategic place of land in our society. Low capacity, and that is another area. How many people do we have who have been trained and equipped to undertake land management? This is a sector that we all agree is strategic. We agree strategic, but we rarely accord it the needed support by arming it with capacity to execute land policies. Next slide. So, something is happening. It's a quotative of the African Union, even in Nigeria. If you notice, the whole world is converging on Africa. We call them investors, right? These people are coming in here to acquire land on very large scale. land in thousands, hundreds of thousands of hectares. And we say we need them for investment, right? The African Union have tried to point to the problems or challenges that come with such large-scale acquisitions. I'm not sure we have taken any measures to ameliorate or check what we are contending with. Those big farms are all over the place now. In some, I'm sure that in Nasarawa, Kaduna, communities have been totally displaced as we talk here. And if we have to uphold their community rights, how was this acquisition done? Where are those people? How have they been catered for? These are questions that if we don't get to treat today, it's not just in Nigeria, in the years to come, we'll reincarnate those troubles that happened in Kenya, in South Africa, all over again. I don't know, but the world still thinks that Africa owes her to feed her. And because we are so poor, we are accepting just everything. It's not bad to have them come round, but we must be ready to put in place measures that will take us to a level that we will not suffer just because they were allowed in. Like I said, a lot of people have been writing about this issue, but the governance issue, to my mind, has been best covered by Transparency International. Their name is not new here. I'm sure we know about these people, right? They have been undertaking studies by batching nations. They will take 5 or 6 nations that they believe have similar tenure problems. What were they investigating? They were looking at what they call land corruption. Land corruption. If you read their reports, I didn't want to put the figures here, but it's so bad. Because corruption, they claim, covers almost from all the strata of society to the point where the most vulnerable are extorted, even sexually. They want land. You want to say, you must bribe somebody. Sometimes for you to access or register your land, you must bribe all through. They have statistics that are very bad to look at. And they have categorized this. They say it's coming because of weak institutions. That means they are referring to those agencies that have to manage what? Land for our society. And they have said it is happening in 3 key areas. Land administration. The processes are very opaque. I will not say ours in Nigeria is opaque. But I can also read a problem in the case of Nigeria. What is making people not register their land? Government do not look at the big picture. In Nigeria, you want to register land, they will ask for tax clearance certificate. They will try a whole lot of things that is supposed to make money for Nigeria. For the government that's involved. Without which you cannot register your land. I had cause to ask a friend in the land ministry. I said, your state sent you to Rwanda. You went to Rwanda. Are they asking for TCC to register land? He looked at me and smiled because I knew when he traveled. So I asked him, when you went to Rwanda, are they asking for TCC to register land? Because you will discover that the cost of land registration is beyond what people will want to go do it. You are charged a percentage of your capital value, the value of your property, right? Right? You are charged, they said they have to value it. And that valuation too has something. If you can see the right people, it's undervalued. They get the money and go. So who is the end loser? The system. The system. Because part of land valuation is a function of land administration. Where they don't have capacity, they can get it done out there objectively. As a student of estate management, what the tables by Parry was what I look at very tiny writings on the table, Parry's valuation table. And I was wondering, I loved the computer printout. And I approached my teacher then, Professor Odo. I said, what am I seeing here? And he said, that data is actually valuation matrix of counties in the UK that you see. It's a map of their city. These are things that can be done. Can be done. I have challenged at a forum like this where I had to meet with land surveyors. They won't go to survey any land until you need a land for title registration. And I asked, it was my guy anyway, he almost slapped me. I said, you people sit down there in the office. Why can't you take a part of the city and just start systematic survey? You may not cover so much, but you could make progress. Why do we, in controlling land use, not make known government development plans to the people, and you wait when the poor people raise their structure with all their savings? That's all they've got. You don't bother when they start. They take it to a particular level, and then you go and see some stop work order and demolition threats. And anyway, when you come back there, after those markings, those developments still go on. So what happens? What happens? Then there are land-based investments, those gargantuan infrastructure projects in the urban area, in the cities, are also areas where corruption is seeping. And when they have to develop, people's rights are acquired. How are they compensated? Or how are they treated? And those projects, how do they get delivered? Urban corruption is another area Transparency International have also explained in their report. It's online. You can download and read it. It's very damning. And why am I bothered with this? Every year they compile the World Bank compiles what they call ease of doing business reports. These are the metrics they rely on, and they give us a very bad picture. Very bad. Next slide. I have to hurry now. Yes, climate change. The former speaker, just before me, explained it. We have seen the severe weather. Why are we bothered? We are people who are practically tied to the land. Our livelihoods, lifestyles are tied to the land, particularly those who are most vulnerable. In fact, in most of African states, those people are confined to the marginally productive areas. That's where they are sent. And they don't have a voice in policy making. I still remember the case of Morocco in Lagos. You remember? the Action governor. Some people cannot remember here. But I can bet that people who live in Lagos know that when they were displaced is the reason why people in the next neighborhood have lost their peace. I'm winding up. We have weak social and economic structure. We don't have the technology. We don't have the financial capacity. So if Hurricane Milton were to hit Africa today, you can imagine the level of devastation and where we will be. We will have to adopt. There is the economics of climate change I cannot go into, where they are talking about carbon credits for African countries. Maybe we can take what we can get from them, but the recommendations I read, next slide, that people who are living in mountainous and coastal areas should move. How we manage the crisis is dependent on our land admin systems. And the governance structure, where it is weak, it will fail us. It will fail us. Next one. The people who are doing all these things. So I want us to just ponder on these questions. Whose interest are subsisting processes, issues and their frameworks that border with land management, particular administration? Whose interests are they serving? Are they serving the people, the vulnerable people? Whose interests are they serving? We also have to ask, who is influencing land policy? Who is influencing land policy? And who is benefiting? If we don't get these answers, whatever efforts you put here, how about a land commission mentioned? All the policies, you remember, all the policies that involve land were thwarted by the states because there was no not just consensus, but there was no trust between the federal and the state. Whatever you come up with got misinterpreted. Right? So we had that problem. So how can we open up this? And how do we engage and promote? We have to define what we do. Clearly, so people who are involved know these are our rights, and they should have their say about their lands. What is their location? If they should not be migrated, if there's no need to migrate them, displace them. A lot of issues that we need to agree with. The people who are concerned, not people at the top only. Next slide. Going. We can achieve transparent accountability by opening up, by recognizing customary tenure, not in the way we have done it in our Land Use Act, but giving it that formality they deserve so that this can be transacted like government grants. And then communities will have a say in what they do. Next slide. Yes, when I left to come here, I told my VC I won't be in Senate. I'm going to Abuja for a conference. And I believe he asked me, I wanted to bring me students. So I want to tell you here, in conclusion, that we run an MC program in land management in my department. And that's the course coordinator's email. Thank you and God bless you. I'm sorry.
afternoon, everybody. I want to crave your indulgence. We have been sitting for quite a while. Elsewise, it may not be ideal. I just want us to stand up, stretch ourselves, and then for 1 minute, and then sit back again. As quickly as possible. Can we be upstanding? Stretch, 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 stretch. We can sit down, please.
Participants, ladies and gentlemen, we have taken 2 presentations already. One, the first one from Professor Obonna, and the second one from Professor Dugeri. So now, question and answers. Let us take all the questions all together. Thereafter, we give the resource person turn by turn to address their questions. So questions, please. Let's quickly take these questions before we move to the next. The first presenter on the lead paper, Professor Obonna. The second one, Professor Dugeri. Questions, comments? Director. So, ladies and gentlemen, do we believe we don't have any question to answer? To ask? Okay. Yes. Direct your question to the speaker.
Thank you very much. My question goes to the first speaker, and I just want a clarification concerning certain things. As a steward, you are subject to your principal's authority. And so how do you balance a situation where your principal wants you to act against the norm or contrary to the best practices? Because that is what I notice happen all around. So how do we balance that situation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Next. Okay.
Balance.
Panelists, girls, ladies and gentlemen, we all agree that the world is now a global village. What happens in America has implications for us in this part of the world. I hope some of us have been following the campaign, the presidential campaign in the US. The 2 candidates, while one is pro-climate change, the other one is anti. And from our projections, the anti-candidate may likely win. And how do you project his views affecting this journey on reversing or tackling climate change? Because all along, a number of actions are on, like vehicles, electric vehicles being made, but while the other one is busy that fossil fuel should be pumped as much as possible. American first. How do you rate the prospect? What do you see as the prospect after this election? Thank you.
Any other question? Comments?
Good afternoon. The lead paper presenter made a statement regarding the directors at the MDAs as stewards. And there is a contradictory view I'm looking at. If they are stewards, actually, and they're obeying their principle in implementing management of resources, including land, how come that sometimes these MDAs, through the managers of land resources, issue certificate to some land owners after barely one year or thereabout? Development control comes to develop the same place. Are they serving the interests of their principal, which could be government through politicians who are running those governments, or they are serving the generality of the people in terms of equitable distribution of land resources? Thank you.
Do we have any more? Okay, now over to Professor Bona.
Thank you. Let me start from the last one. I just hope we read my lips. You see, we often applaud the lawn that is greener across the fence. That lawn generally is linked with the Japa syndrome. But we easily forget that those places we are Japa into were made by human beings. One of the candidates for the US election as we speak is still in court, yet is running an election. That is simply an indicator of institutions. At the backstage here, we were discussing something, and I said that part of the challenge is that we are ostriching. We play the ostrich. I want to believe that there are civil servants here whose bosses will have told, write this, and they say, sorry, sir, sorry, ma, I won't. Do I have any witness? Do I have any witness? Were you sacked? You see, we have to be conscious. I teach at Babcock, or rather, I study at Babcock University. But before then, I was at the Federal University of Technology. In fact, at the point in time when I left to go to Babcock University, I was secretary of ASU in my second tenure. Sorry, I'm confessing my sins. As an elder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I went into unionism. One of the basic reasons is that I wanted a situation where I will have the capacity to review the case of any staff. Even when the governing council says, kill and bury. I'll use my position to walk up to the management to say, look, let's look at it again. It has to do with, we've mentioned it, political will is not in the air. It is individualistic. Leadership is at your own corner. In any case, you don't have to poke your fingers in the eye of your boss. Again, as we make policies, the rules, that is what is guiding the Western nations. When they say, if you do this, you go to jail, you go to jail. So, if we make plans, for instance, zoning regulations, and the boss asks you to modify zoning, are there rules for modifying the zoning rating? You follow it. When you have opportunity to advise the boss, advise properly, because we are all human beings. I hope I've taken that. Protagonists for and against climate change, sir. You know, like I said, climate science is a big one. Just like in every field, there is politics. Just like in COVID, there was politics. What I usually told people during COVID is that whether COVID is a game or not, there is something that is called COVID. The other fact is that you and I are not at the table of the pitch where this game is being played. So don't go to argue and fight. Do what you need to do to survive. Climate change protagonists, those who do not accept, have their reasons. But be true to yourself in every circumstance as a steward. Going beyond your mandate, your contractual relationship with your boss, to do what you know is good and right before God and man. I think that answers the first question of your principal asking you to do the wrong thing. We need to be bold. Somebody has said, in public service, or in fact any sphere of life, try to be firm, friendly, and what? Fair, firm, and what? Friendly. I've just told you, I was a unionist. But I never insulted anybody. As a matter of fact, the first and the only time I got an ETF funding, it was seized because I wrote a memo that got the university to go on strike for the first time in its history. So the bursar decided to keep my money. And I didn't even know. I funded myself to the conference abroad and came back. So please, we are stewards. Don't forget the position the boss is occupying today. I have somebody in this hall who was my student about, was that 20 years or 25 years ago, who is now a boss. It is a barber's chair. Someday it will turn, somebody else will sit there.
Professor Gori, is there any intervention again? Prof, any intervention from your side?
Anyone?
Is there any action from your side?
I'm wondering whether I communicated. Whether I passed a message. Nobody seemed to ask any question or observe. When I was given that paper to come present here, you know, in the past conferences that I participated, I took liberty to always amend. And then you choose me, instead of calling EFCC to come and explain. No, those transparency issues and accountability issues are issues that don't go well. But the truth remains, like philosophers have told us, that a life unexamined is not worth living. So the intent was not to cast aspersions on us here, but for us together to find pathways to advance land governance in Nigeria. And when they said Africa, You know, they wanted to confound me. So I had to talk the small one that I know. I'm grateful to be part of you. I think I've learned a lot being in your midst. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. We now move to the next presentation on economic analysis of sustainable land use practice for climate change mitigation by the Director.
Promote investment in sustainable land management. Microloans or grants can be provided to smallholder farmers to adopt sustainable practices, renewable energy-powered irrigation schemes, organic farming, or agroforestry. The forest cover and the carbon generated from this will be used to obtain carbon credit schemes for sequestering carbon or conservation practices. Farmers are able to earn additional income by participating in carbon trading markets or benefiting from low-interest green loans that support sustainable projects. You also have digital agriculture and precision farming. The AI, artificial intelligence, has become the order of the day. Don't be left behind. If you are afraid of technology or you think you are old, please unlearn your fears. Please, you have to learn it. It's not an option. We just have to become digital, including agriculture as well. There is digital farming. Technology can play a significant role in sustainable land management using drones, satellite imagery, and mobile apps, even for weather forecasting and advisory services. Farmers can monitor crop health, soil moisture, nutrient levels real-time using various apps. This allows for more precise use of water, fertilizers, and pesticides, minimizing waste and improving yield. Digital platforms can also link farmers directly to markets, bypassing intermediaries and enabling them to receive better prices for their products. Community-based natural resource management. I think by giving local communities the power to manage their resources, sustainable livelihoods, individuals are encouraged to protect their own environment for future generation. Collective ownership and decision-making equally strengthen social bonds and creates more equitable distribution of resources. Sustainable land management and livelihood creation through non-timber forest products. So, let me see. I don't want to take much of your time, so what are we to do? Building and education. Okay, thank you. Let me just, I think others. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay. Please go back to the next slide, previous slide. Okay, so government policies. Because sustainable land management, even though the Land Use Act, it gives a lot of powers to the federal government. But the certificate of occupancy is still signed by His Excellency, the Executive Governor of each state. What does that tell us is that there's a lot of work to be done at the grassroots. So now with the quantum of money going to the local governments also have the powers to make their edits, as it affects them, since the farmers are more in the local government. Please, can you tell them to reduce the noise? So I believe we have adequate government policies, but on how to transfer programs that will ensure economic empowerment, economic viability, and sustenance is what we need. Community engagement, it can be better, especially involving the vulnerable groups, especially women too. I'm also a vulnerable. How many female directors are in the Federal Civil Service? So you can see, I'm also a vulnerable, So community engagement is key. Agroecological practices, we need to promote that. People already know a lot. We're also losing a lot of indigenous knowledge, so we should document and research new ones so that we meet fit for purpose of the day. Restoration projects like the Great Green Wall, we need more. The Great Green Wall is just for one zone of the country. We need to develop programs that will restore, that are peculiar to each agroecological zone. Capacity building is key. You can't give out what you don't have, you know. But research, can we go to the next slide, sir? Before I go to this one, I want to talk about research, because we are all directors here. And it's likely you have a friend who is a governor, or this or that, or a senator, or this or that. This is a country that has banned overseas training, and we are not investing in research. Then we want the best. Seed Council, I don't know the last time, you know, when you go to Seed Council before, you will go away with some, you know, hybrid seeds. But we need quality seeds that are pest resistant, that can withstand the volume, torrents of rainfall we are having. So we need, you know, there's serious need for research, improvement in, you know, even in the seedlings, in also domestication of some foraging products. Like I mentioned, Orienta Fagara roots, which is used in sickle cell. And like I mentioned, Ayon Pako, I don't know the name of that one. No. Abere, thank you, ma. Which is, it just cuts your sugar and so many things like that. So we need them. We need them. Even the shea butter tree is not common like before. So we need to domesticate them so that they will be, we'll find them easier to do. Do you know, if you go to the market, around this time last year, avocado was 50 naira, 100 naira. But now it's around 1,500, 2,000. Do you know why? A study has shown that avocado will be extinct in the next 30 years. And it's not just expensive in Nigeria. You know, even in UK or any other place recently, it has become very, very expensive. If you plant an avocado, it will take an average of 5 years. But if you graft it using a mature tree, it will start fruiting by 2 years. And you know, you'll be in good business. So these are the quantum, the kind of information we need, and that we need to stimulate our friends who are in research institutes or wherever, you know, so as a conference of directors, it's a good opportunity to rub mind and exchange this information, because we need food. We need food. We all cannot japa. Even if you japa, you need food, quality food. And you know what? This is our pako that they will say we are committing murder. If you try and buy it over $100, don't say I told you. I've not said anything, no. Okay. Financing sustainable land management in Nigeria. Finance is essential. The Bible says money answer. You talk. So we could do with more budgetary allocations. Well, global partnership is key. Sometimes we don't have the expertise, like I said, like some of those forest products we want to domesticate, like that bitter cola, dates, and you know, debinu, and all those. So we could have international support. We could do with some if we have it. Then we could encourage public-private partnerships. If you cannot do it alone, you can form a cooperative society, and you can go on and go on. So accessing climate finance mechanism, such as the Green Climate Fund, can bolster projects focused on climate change mitigation and adaptation. Community-based financing through microfinance initiatives among yourselves, or through community bank, or through local government. They are receiving massive, you know, serious money. We need to hold them accountable. It must not be business like before. Billions, billions, billions. In fact, my eyes are opening. Billions. You know. Next slide. Next slide, please. So, sustainable land management plays a crucial role in boosting agricultural revenue generation, you know, mitigates climate change effects, it improves productivity, and promotes agricultural exports, especially when it's organically produced. So, we'll be smiling, so the bank. So, and the key aspects include increased crop yield, diversification of products, improved quality of products, market access and competitiveness. You know, Ghana always gives us a good run for our giant of Africa. You know, we need to fight and take our place again. You know, enhance resilience to climate change. You know, local economic benefits and international economic benefits. Can we please go to the next slide? So before I leave this place, I've told you I won't take your time. I used to be a teacher, but today I'm not wearing the cap of a teacher. You know, it's a call to action for everybody. But I will want to say that we all have a role to play. When we are thinking of going global, we have to start our actions locally. You know, the change begins with me and you. With me and Good, thank you. So there are some trees that we could, plant around our house or incorporate into our small farms. And when we have acquired the relevant knowledge, we can cascade it to a bigger farm. Like the neem tree is being used as a pesticide, But we don't see it like before, with all its ruggedness, and so on. So also the Fugara root, the Pronus africana, that is, African cherry, is normally used very good for prostrate. It's almost going extinct. We also have Africana yellow, that is used in, if you have ever used malaria, there is something they put in the bottle and say add water or add Fanta. It looks yellow. It's becoming almost extinct. It's becoming very, so even if you buy the malaria drug, you use a very small one, not like before that, it will be entire yellow. Those are the kind of things we can ask our research institutes to look into. The Garcinia cola, that's the bitter cola. Then the violet tree, so many. So it's a call to action for everybody to strengthen our policy frameworks, increase investments in SLM, ensure capacity building, and be sure we can't give out what we don't have. So let's not be an ignorant, let's acquire the relevant knowledge that will make us competitive and be able to deliver the best and have good return on our investments. We must promote enhanced research and innovation, promote international cooperation, and incentivize sustainable practices. There is need for massive awareness raising. All these things we're talking about, there's need for massive awareness raising. Radio jingles, news on the television, and so on social media. Social media is a cheap way of disseminating information. Next slide. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Director. Mrs. Ropikatu Odetero. Another round of applause for her, please, ladies and gentlemen. We now go ahead to take the other paper together so that we take the question like the way we did before. Let me now invite Estesebeyo Ojikutu Olawale, Director, Acquisition, Revocation, and Compensation, Lagos State Lands Bureau.
Community is recognized by federal governments. We have Pulibut units 011 here, but J under ward of the local governments. So we are not just foreigner. This is our home. We have nowhere to go. It was on the 3rd of January 2020. Nigerian Navy came into this our community, asked us to leave. That government to use this place. The brought in caterpillar, then started demolishing our house. We have nowhere to go.
Láti ọdún tí mo ti gbọ́njú, I'm 58 years. Mi gbọ́ irú nǹkan báyìí kò ṣẹlẹ̀ lójú mi rí. Kí ló dé? Ọ̀ṣà ni ká move out. Wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí í yìnbọn fáwọn èèyàn. Àwọn èèyàn rọ́ sómi àtọmọdé àtàgbà. Kí là á ṣe? Kí ló ṣẹlẹ̀? Ọ̀nà àwọn tẹ̀ ní ẹni tí tó fẹ́ sọ. Pé kẹ́ni bó ti ṣàti move out. Láti ibo lẹ́jọ́, wọ́n ní federal. Àdúró pẹ̀lú orí eré àwọn èèyàn kan shoot àwọn èèyàn rọ́ sómi ni. Gbogbo ìyàwó àtọmọ kéékèèké. A pe ọba ọ̀nà ní débí. Ó fi wá lọ́kàn balẹ̀. Títí wọ́n dé. Tó wá mú gbogbo ẹrù àtọ́ fún ìṣẹ̀tọ́ ní foreigner ní gbogbo wa. Ọmọ Nàìjíríà ni ọmọ Èkó ni wá. Àwòrì pọ́nbélé ni wá. À ń ṣe fake. Àmú ọ̀dọ̀ fi local government la wà ń bí báyìí. A gbọ́ nǹkan kan. Kíjọba kan gbà wá. Ìlú wa ni o. Kán bá wa kán dá wa padà sí ìlú wa níbòmíì.
Àwọn bàbá tó bí bàbá wọn tí wàá ń lu ìsìn láti 1810 ibi báyìí náà bí wọn sí. A kàn rí wọn lájèjì tó wọlé dé. So nígbà tá a tún máa rí báyìí a kàn ti rán àwọn tó kù tó tún wọlé dé ni. Bọ́n ṣe mú bọ̀ nìyẹn ká yìnbọn yìnbọn bẹ́ẹ̀ everybody wa bá ṣe ń dún nìyẹn. Sọ pé ìbá tó lè kó ẹrù àkó ìbá wọn tí ò lè kó ìbá wọn tó tún kù gan ìbá ẹrù tó kù nulẹ̀. Ìbọn náà fi ń lé anybody wá jáde àtọkùnrin àtobìnrin. Àwọn ìyá arúgbó kan tó wà ń bẹ gan ọ̀hún tẹ fẹ́ gbà ká gbé wọn tẹ́pọ̀ wọn lòmíì gan ẹ̀yìn la fi pọ̀ wọn.
Nínú ilé yìí màmá arúgbó kan wà ń bẹ̀. Abẹ gan títí pé ó ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ padà gbé ni wọn aláwọ̀ rárá.
Gbogbo property wa ọ̀túnká àwọn àmì wọ̀nyẹn àwọn mọ́là pẹ̀lú wọn wà ní tẹ́ pé àwọn mọ́tò míì tó a ní bíbá yọ búṣì mọ́tò yẹn ọ̀tá mọ́tò yẹn ọ̀tá fún àwọn mọ́là ọ̀ ṣe gbogbo ẹ̀.
Àwùjọ ẹ̀gbọ́n kan ọ̀dẹ̀ nọ́tìsì wa wọ́n dé nǹkan bíi aago 10 láàárọ̀ nígbà tó dẹ̀ dé ọkọ̀ bẹ̀ sí yìnbọn ni wọ́n á ní ká kúrò ń lò àdẹ̀fi kúrò àmọ́ ká tó lè kúrò ohun tán náà lára wa ò dáa ẹlòmíì já sómi ẹlòmíì ọlọgbẹ́ ẹlòmíì lómi ni inú èrè là ń sùn ìlú kejìlá kan là ń lọ sùn wọ́n gbé lé wa sí ìlú sọ̀dá ìran lé wa sí.
Land. In fact, the house you are staying, the material is from land. The limestone, even if you are using wood, it's from land. Somebody must have planted that wood. So everything in life revolves around land. And if there is no human being, there is no land. There's no context at all. That's why in land administration you have what you call the object, the subject, and the interest. It is the interest now that link the subject and the object together. Am I communicating? Very good. land is not just, our good friend Lorenzo Catula, he says that land is not just an economic asset, that is a fundamental human right. It's a fundamental human right. I also want to tell you that because land is so important, anything that is important, you will see a lot of agitation around it. Yes or no? The feuds between families, neighbors, adjoining communities can frequently be traced to land conflict. Otherwise, why will UK move from Europe to Argentina to fight over Falkland Island? Why Umuleri Aguleri problem? Why Ife Mudakeke problem? Why even Ukraine and Russia problem? Why Gaza and Israeli problem? All this is about what? Land. So it shows that you who are land administrators, you are God sent. You are doing a lot of job. And I'm one of you. So, I'm not trying to define land, but I'm just trying to describe it because the professors have done that. When I met this divination by Ambrose Bierce, he said, land, a part of the earth surface, consider as property. The theory of land property, subject to private ownership and control, is the foundation of modern society. And it is eminently worthy of superstructure. Maybe later you go through it. It's a very, very loaded statement. The Cadastra 2014 also talked about land to say that a land object is a piece of land in which homogeneous condition exists. The next slide, please. I've described what land is from my own perspective and from perspective of other professionals. Now, let us look at community rights. A community is a group of people living in a particular local area. They share community possession. They share community patrimony. At this stage, let me say that individual land ownership is very, very alien to us in Africa, in this part of the world. Land belongs to community. Land belongs to family. Land belongs to villages, not to an individual. Even if you have an individual land by way of gift, it will later become a family land. Do you agree with me? If a land is given to this man, that land becomes a family land because his children will also be part of it. And you will see this in the celebrated case of Amadou Tijani versus Secretary of Southern Nigeria in 1921, where it was by the Privy Council recognized that land belongs to vast majority, of which many are dead, few living, and countless members yet unborn. Land belongs to community, belongs to family, not to individual. So every community, the local population must have right of ownership. They must be able to control and manage their land and land resources. They must have right to be engaged, that is participatory decision making. Not that you just move onto their land and start dishing out orders. No, you must engage them. The right to protection. The community must have right of protection on their land, and they must have right to exclude others from enjoying the fruit of their land. Please, next slide. Yeah, because you have asked me to talk about community rights and land governance, I'm trying to explain what I know about all this. When you talk about governance, it's establishment of policies and continuous monitoring of their proper implementation. Governance has been defined to refer to structures and processes that are designed to ensure what? Accountability, transparency, responsiveness, rule of law, stability, equity, and inclusiveness, empowerment, and broad-based participation. That is governance. Please, the next slide. Yes. I did this about 15 years ago when I was talking about the concept of land governance. And, go to the next slide, please. It's just... land governance now is the process by which decisions are made regarding the access to land and land use, the manner in which those decisions are implemented, and the way that conflicting interests in land are reconciled. That is UN Habitat. The FIG, the Federation of International Surveyors, define land governance to be policies, processes, and institutions by which land, property, natural resources are managed. These include decisions on access to land, land rights, land use, land development. It is about determining and implementing sustainable land policies. The next slide, please, because of time. So, now I'm trying to merge community rights and land governance now. Community rights and land governance refers to framework and practices that ensure local community have a say in management, use of land and land resources. This concept emphasizes the importance of recognizing indigenous and local population rights to their ancestral land. According to the Roman law, community land ownership right consists of users. That is, to use the land, fructus, to enjoy or earn fruit from the land, and then abusers, to assign the right of the community to assign, sell their property the way they like. Now, the next slide, please. Do we really have these in our community? No. I'm saying there is a gap here between community rights and land governance in Nigeria. Even though our land policy recognizes a customary right of occupancy, isn't it? Please move on. So, what has happened? Why this gap? We have this gap because our policies and our attitude in Nigeria does not recognize indigenous or community rights. Land is very, very central to community identity. I think May this year, FIG conference took place in Accra. And one of the chiefs, you know that in Accra, in Ghana, they have the stool land and the government land. And they have two different land registry, one for the stool land, one for the government. One of the chiefs told us that their land is their means of livelihood. It is their cultural heritage, and it is their identity. So you can imagine. In the first instance, I was talking to my brother, my elder brother is here, my senior colleague here, that in the first instance, who says we must have the same land, we must have a uniform land policy in Nigeria? No. What is land to somebody from the east is not what is land to somebody from the north. And being a federal system of government, we don't need it. All the states must be able to evolve their own land policies with special recognition to the peculiarities of that state. I met a small boy, about a 14-year-old boy in Tanzania, and he told me that, bro, land to me is like a blanket. I wear it like my forefather wore it. Look at that statement. We must acknowledge and formalize the land right of community so that we prevent this position and ensure that they have access to their resources. Director of Lands, are we listening? Yeah. Failure to do this, to recognize indigenous land rights, will contribute to marginalization. It will strip people of their cultural and economic autonomy. Like those people that were dislodged now, what do you think will become of them? And you don't want area boys, you don't want beggars on the streets, and you are depriving them of their means of livelihood. The land is their livelihood. They till the land, and they use the land for other economic purposes. Please, the next slide. Yeah, environmental stewardship or justice. We've heard a lot about environmental stewardship, but what I'm going to say here is that the local people, they understand their environment, and they know how to balance their environment. I was part of a study sometimes in Lagos at one of the riverine areas. And while discussing with the elders of that community, I noticed that at a point they do have a flood disturbing them. And I asked them, how do you people get to know? He said, there's this thing they call soldier hunt, that the moment they start seeing them, exponentially, they know that there's going to be a lot of flooding that year, and they will all move up. These are native intelligence. Communities, yeah, I've explained that. We must ensure that communities are not disproportionately affected by land-related decisions, especially in the context of industrial development, agriculture, and conservation. Because you want to do developmental projects, doesn't mean that people should go and die or should go into the ocean. No. Please, the next slide. I promise I will not waste your time. Next slide, please. Land tenure security. You see, at the FIG conference that took place in Accra, while those of us from Africa, particularly from the West Africa and the East Africa, were talking about land use, tenure issues, compensation, our brothers from Europe and America, Australia, they were talking about land automation, land administration automation. They were talking about equipment. They're talking about softwares to run. They're not talking about land adjudication again. Nobody is talking about that. We are far, 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 far behind. We must ensure that we give legal recognition of community land ownership or right to use their land. If you do this, we will be reducing the risk of land grabbing. I was part of a study in February here in Abuja. There is this organization from Netherlands called IHS, with Erasmus University. Actually, I happen to be a student of that university too. And I told the people that the land grabbing we're experiencing in Lagos will be a child's play by the time Abuja is ripe for that. Those of you managing land in Abuja, I'm giving you a gist. The land grabbing you will experience in Abuja. Oh. We must clear land tenure to create certainty, to improve livelihood for our communities. If we do not do this, we'll be creating chaotic society. We must secure land tenure to protect the dignity and the autonomy of our community. Look at what happened there now. The man said they came and they were shooting sporadically. Where will they go? The next slide, please. If you must protect our community right, then community must be involved in decision about land use, development. Indeed, it's no longer fashionable. It is no longer fashionable deciding for people. You take decision with people. Indeed, even if it's your nuclear family, for example, now if it's your wife's birthday and you have just 100K to spend on her, but better ask her, Madam, I have 100,000 for you, and tell me what you want me to buy. Because if you buy the wrong thing, she will take it, but she will not appreciate it. But if you discuss, you engage, even if it is 1,000 naira you spend, she will appreciate it. So it's no longer fashionable, this taking decision for people. After all, the land use act we are talking about is a trust. I mean, it's a trust. And anybody holding things in trusteeship, you are accountable to the people. You are responsible to the people. I hate to hear this word that the government owns the land. For where? On paper, government owns the land, but in the heart of people, they own their land. And that is what is causing conflict. You must engage people. That's what I'm trying to say. Please pardon me if I'm being... You must engage people. If you want to take... The community's voice must be heard. When you engage them, they feel proud. They own whatever project you are bringing to them, and they will guide it jealously. But where you don't engage them, they will be the one to spoil that project. Please, the next slide. Legal framework. We must have, can we have a single house, please? We must have a legal framework, that protect community rights. In fact, the so-called Land Use Act, I've never seen any place in the Land Use Act that prohibits people holding land. Fine, you can tell me that what you have now is interest in land and not the land per se. I agree. We must provide mechanism for conflict resolution, especially where there are competing claims. Yes. Otherwise, you see, I was doing the research on the land conflict some time ago, about 8 years ago. And then I said, okay, let me start by knowing how many cases do we have in court that has to do with land matters. I discovered that in a year, it was 32%. We had 32% of land matter. I think that was 2014. In 2015, it was about 31 point something percent. This is more, this is huge. And that is why you see cases spending almost 20 years. There's no justice in that. You have matters in court, and the whole area is fully developed by the time the matter is finally put to rest. So where is the justice? We must also discourage traditions and customary laws that discriminate against women. Women land right. Even I'm aware that Land Use Act, our Land Use Act, good enough, does not prohibit women from having it, but we still have some traditional customs that prohibit that. We must do away with those traditions. Women, I mean, if you have a woman as a medical doctor, you have a man as, why should a woman be subservient? Or why should they not have their own land if they have the money? Please, the next slide. My big brother talked much about this challenge, so I don't want to talk about it. Go to the next slide, please. But let me quickly say something here about part of the problem we have in land administration is putting square peg in a round hole. You will see that most of the people that are at the ends of affairs of land, whatever, are people who don't even know anything about land. And it becomes a political patronage. And that is where it looks as if those of us who are land administration practitioners don't know it. No. We are experts in this field. And I beat my chest to say that anywhere. I also want to say that one of the challenges is that we rush too much into technology these days. GIS, as if GIS will solve all the problems. GIS is just a tool. In land administration, it's less than 5%. It's a tool. Get your LIS right first. Please, the next slide. Let me conclude by saying that the relationship between community rights, land governance, economic stability is a critical issue that requires the urgent attention from policy makers, human rights advocates, developmental organizations, and you, land administrators. Always be ready to tell the truth. Always be ready to tell the truth. If we must salvage the situation, then we must be ready to do the right thing. Effective land governance. We need to put in place effective land governance that respect community rights. This can lead to improved social cohesion. Yes. Economic development. When people are able to till their land, get food to eat, get little money to buy, probably pay their children's school fees, they won't even look at what government is doing in Abuja. It is when all these things are not possible that you see them coming out to say we are protesting. And please, the next slide. This is my recommendation. I always love to talk about challenges and then make recommendations so that it won't be as if we're just talking about problems. And number one on the list is that let us strengthen our community right through policy reform. If it is not there now, you can make reform to put it there. All of us are members of one community or the other. Funny enough, when they want to take decision about the community I am from in Lagos, they will exclude me because they know the man will not accept. But no problem. It's good for them to know where you stand. Okay? Capacity building, is that right? Support community-based initiative. When you do that, you are encouraging them and you are allowing them to partake in whatever decision you are taking. And this puts legitimacy into what government is doing. I'm telling you, when you do that, they will own whatever project you are bringing, and they will guide it jealously. Yes, I'm saying that maintaining your dual land tenure. It's only in Lagos that you see that we don't have rural areas in Lagos. And as at the time Papa Jakonde made that law, we had the Ministry of Rural Development. Anyway, allow your local government, allow your customary right of occupancy to go simultaneously with your statutory right of occupancy. I think the one mistake we are making in this part of the world is that we believe that what is coming from the colonial master is superior to what we have. No. In fact, what is customary in Britain is customary to them. And what is customary to us is customary to us. You know. So I'm also advocating that let transparency be the entry point of your land governance. You see, remove transparency from your land administration. What you have is carcass. When you allow things to be shrouded in secrecy, in an opaque situation, then you are not going anywhere. And your function, your duty as director of land is tell them. I've been vindicated severally, and I'm happy about that. Because one day we'll all give account of whatever we do. You are a leader in your own right. And don't allow anybody to. So please, it's by acting visibly, predictably, and understandably. So one of the things you can do is to have standard. Do your standard. This is what you must have. This is what you must have to get this. And do it. And make it transparent. I have said that let your land decision-making process be participatory. It will increase your legitimacy. And finally, I'm advocating that let your land acquisition and compensation follow due process. I'm having a challenge in Lagos now, Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road, where everybody is going to court. Yeah. You see, no amount of money you pay that can ever be adequate. But if you make the process to be transparent enough, then, I mean, you are good to go. I happen to be the secretary to the committee on Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road, and I do my duty and I get out of it. You see, in one of my write-up, I said we need what I call the 3 C's for you to administer compensation very well. 1, you must consult the people. Consult people. Number 2, get their consent. If you are doing a developmental project, nobody can say, government, don't do it. Especially if you explain to them. Consult them, get their consent, and pay their compensation. These are my 3 C's. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, SS Surveyor Olawale, for that beautiful presentation. Now, distinguished participants, let us take the questions all together from the 2 presentations for them to respond so that we go for lunch. Comment, questions? Questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. I miss my very good friend, Oga Ojikutu. Thank you very much for your submissions. I'm Chief David Bade Jogbin. I'm the Federal Registrar of Titles. Let me say this first. The clip we just watched, the unsavory and unpalatable dispossessing some community of their ancestral home. I watched it, very pathetic, but then I listened to one madam there that said, federal government, they say, now federal government, oh. And I'm very sure many of my organs directors here will have listened to that. Let me correct that error. That is an assumption. Yes, the mama that was talking there, that was saying, na federal government they say, na federal government they say. The truth of the matter is that the federal government doesn't go into any state to acquire any property. I will not say it is Lagos state government, so I don't get into that trouble again. But then, let me just disabuse our mind. We at the federal level don't perpetrate that sort of actions. So that the clip will not give an erroneous belief that federal government act in such a tawdry manner, dispossessing people of their ancestral home. Thank you very much for that. Now, you profile solutions at the tail end of many of the challenges to community rights. I will have taken you on if you have not provided some solutions at the tail end, because we know there will always be problems. But at the tail end, how do we survive these problems? But then I will want to also make a suggestion to some of the solutions that you have provided. You see, the judiciary can do a lot. And they have been doing, but they have not been able to do a lot. And one aspect I want to refer to is this acquisition by many states for public purposes. And after 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, those areas are left abandoned. And when they are left abandoned, it is either that the same stewards that are supposed to supervise such start to give people to encroach. But then I think judiciary has actually come in forcefully that when the purpose for which acquisition has been made was not useful, then it must revert back to the initial owners. And that has always been the problem. Like when those communities were being dispossessed, and yet you are giving to individuals to build skyscrapers or whatever, and it's not meant for public purposes. I think each state and their land administrators should reconsider this. But then, let me just round up this way without taking much time. I think the biggest threat, the biggest challenge, and I'm using that word, singular, threat, challenge, not one, are we people sitting right in here. Because we influence every challenges, either climate, either whatever, is still human beings that are doing this, perpetuating this. And who are they? We are the ones sitting down here. If we do not change our attitude, some think of generative force for the government, and that is their whole purpose of land administration. Let's generate revenues. Let's do this. Yes, I know I will have to go outside there and be challenged by my co-directors as well. But the truth is this. When I was invited to participate, I thought I asked all my staff to gather together and give me papers, summarize it, and let me process it. And I called them before coming down from Lagos. I said, you have given me so many, about 7 or 8 challenges. I said, you are wasting your time. There's just one single challenge. You as a human being, you are the problem of everything. You are the cause of every single thing. And who are those? My guys sitting down here. When they influence appropriately, they are the one that do assessment that is not even proper. That was the seminar of yesterday and day before yesterday. And then they are the one that will also write something and then they will dispossess. I know, they will cut it. I will stop there.
Again, the last paper by Mr. Olawale Ojikutu. I don't want to go into the argument of who is the cause and who is not the cause. I'm actually bothered about this issue of equity benefits and contributions. Why is it that always when government wants to acquire land, the community buy-in is lacking? Why is it there is no time for host communities to be enlightened, educated, and carried along that what is coming in the next 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year is going to be for the interest of everybody? Take, for instance, like he mentioned, Lagos-Calabar highway that was dropped on us like a volcano. And we begin to ask, yes, we want to cut down the travel hours between Lagos and Calabar. What about East-West Road that have been there for over 10, 15 years? And then the communities along that corridor of Lagos-Calabar highway are crying that they never knew anything about it. They are Nigerians. Why do we always do things in a hurry? Olawale said he's part of that very committee and is the secretary. Don't hop in and hop out. Go and tell people in that committee that they need to take more patience. If that highway is to favor all of us, let there be due diligence in carrying the people along. That is one. Two, the last speaker before him, she was talking about issues of awareness creation on climate change and land management. We have issues here. Sometimes I get cold when I come to a situation like this. Awareness creation, sensitization has always been the sing-song since we started hearing about climate change many years ago. Who is coordinating, who is spearheading, who is sustaining this awareness creation? Is it done in bits and pieces that each time we come begin to hear about it? Which government agency, which individual, which organization is spearheading this climate change awareness creation and sustainability, so that we'll be able to know a long timeline, monitoring evaluation, whether we are gaining the experiences and understanding in trying to mitigate climate change. I think these things have to put squarely. Otherwise, next time I come and I hear awareness creation and all the rest of them, I might choose to stay and take my coffee and go home, not taking any notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. I have 2 questions, one each for the 2 speakers. I am Dr. Garba Ibrahim Malumfashi, Research Fellow of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, Kuru, Jos. Let me start with the first speaker, Mrs. Odetero. Mrs. Odetero, you are my friend. I've not seen you for the last 22 years. It's good to see you here. And I enjoyed listening to you on your paper on sustainable land management. You mentioned some 4 core principles for sustainable land management, including equity, resilience, but you didn't say anything about them. You just mentioned them, maybe thinking that we all knew them. It will have helped us to know what these core principles are, really. But more importantly, I expected to hear the frameworks, legal, policy, and the institutional that we have in place for installment or mainstreaming sustainable land management in Nigeria, so that we know whose responsibility it is and what are the legal regimes that regulate sustainable land management in Nigeria. Secondly, sir, for the second speaker, in particular, there is a recommendation made at the end of the presentation asking for policy reform. I would have loved to hear which area of the policy. Of course, our land policy is the Land Use Act. And indeed, the speaker stated that the Land Use Act has provided for community rights. But then asking for more reform in that area would require us listening more to what actually do we need to do more. We know of the many problems in the Land Use Act. So it's good to hear which area of the Land Use Act do we need to work on to ensure community rights protection. Thank you.
Okay. I want to appreciate the last speaker. You spoke eloquently concerning, okay, I am Stephen Edremoda, Director of Lands Delta State. You spoke eloquently concerning community rights. I was very intrigued by the way you spoke. However, I have a little concern. You didn't relate practically, because I know that when it comes to land acquisition, there is a framework through which land acquisition is done, and it is the Land Use Act. And we all know that that act, the people who created that act never had the people in mind. Now, so if you are acquiring land and you were talking about community interests, the acquiring authority, have they ever been fair to the community? The answer is no. And again, I want to bring your attention to something very significant. In most cases, when you want to acquire a place, after the acquisition is done, the law says you pay compensation for unexhausted improvement. Practically, you find out that the community, the host community who originally owned the land, most probably before the acquisition is done, they may have sold all their holdings in that land. And so you get a situation where you want to pay compensation, the host community are looking at you, the people who have unexhausted improvement on land are looking at you, and you are thinking, how do I manage the host community? How do I manage the people I'm supposed to pay compensation to? So at the end of the day, the law does not really contemplate taking community interests into being, because nobody has really given that the thought and the attention that it really deserves. So in most cases, when communities have finished selling and you want to pay compensation for unexhausted improvement, you have a problem. They tell you, we sold to them, you want to pay compensation to them, what about us? So I don't know, probably we should talk more about how this law, the legal framework, should be adjusted so that the community can properly be attended to. But from the way you spoke, it looks like probably in Lagos State it's so convenient to manage community. But if you manage them so conveniently, like, why are they going to court? I just wanted to throw light on that. Thank you, sir.
Yes, let's start from this side.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm Rashidat Lawan. I want to relate to what my dear Oga, my dear brothers just mentioned. I feel from this room, he just said something about the community and the host community. The people of the host are the people that I think we should talk to first. Because if there's compensation coming up, I feel they have the knowledge before the community. We should be able to talk to each other first because we are the authority in assessing things like this, for us to be just to the nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody from this side? Okay, the next two.
Good afternoon. My name is Rashida Otoyinlola, representing Director, Agricultural Land and Climate Change in Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. Maybe being advocates for gender, I'm thinking that gender people have been canvassing that what is the role of gender in land acquirement, because farmers believe that they need to acquire land, especially women. So I'm thinking maybe if they want to reform the land acquisition reform, please, let's just put gender and for people in concern. Based on what Director of Environment talked to, I think our department is working with them on mitigation of climate change, because when we are talking of food security, if we don't think of climate change and land, when they even said I should come and represent him, I'm just thinking that I think we and land and also development are like opposites. Because we are canvassing for the land to be sustainable, people that they should not be more exposed than land again for urbanization. We want land to be farmed. People should be farmed because we need food security. But like what environmental director said, that there's a way we can come together. When people build, please, I think government too is encouraging it. Let plant tree. By planting tree, we are helping the land, and we are even helping ourselves. We are helping the environment. So that all of things that is going in the extinction that Madam said, we can have it back, and we increase our income too. We will not be relying on one source of income that we're having. Even you consume it in your house, is an advantage to you if you don't even sell it. So like what we are even saying in our department now, pound that we are using to mitigate the climate change. We are trying to discourage deforestation and fossil boiling. Either we like it or not, I think the economy is making us to reduce fossil boiling. But a lot of people are not open, they are not on generator again. Please, if we even have him, please let's find the way we are going to mitigate, because all these things, they are affecting us, both our health and our community. Thank you.
The last one behind you there. See there.
Thank you. My name is Augustine Uchibe, and I'm from Abia State. Once again, my brother and friend, Estate Surveyor and Valuer Ojikutu, I did not expect anything less from you. Let me thank you, and I especially want to, just like the research fellow from Kuru said, in addition, for you to delve more. I know it's a seed that you've planted, and I'm sure you wouldn't hesitate if I invited you to Abia State. We want to domesticate some of the processes that you've spoken to. My challenge actually lies with the paper presented by Dr. Adetoro. Because with the spate of urbanization, the way our population is running through, we've heard that presently we are about the highest in terms of population growth and industrialization. I was looking for how we, as directors of lands, we could come into helping control climate change and its effects. I don't know where that disconnect was for me, but I would have loved to have you tell me how I could make policies that would engender that. But all in all, let me say thank you to all the presentations and the presenters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now take responses from the speakers. Yes, Mrs. Auditor. First speaker.
Distinguished directors, thank you very much. It sincerely means I actually communicated. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Let me start with the last question or comment, that with the urbanization and population explosion currently witnessed in the country, that there will be pressure on our resources. How do we mitigate climate change? It needs an hydra-headed solution. And the truth is that I will take it plus the first question that said, who is in charge of awareness raising? It's a black man problem that we work in silos. We are supposed to be working in synergy. About 20 years ago, I was in Malaysia several times, but our first visit, they showed us there's a river that passed through Kuala Lumpur, you know, a major river. And they showed us the before and after intervention. And 10 ministries, agencies, you know, collaborated to clean up the river. They used to have flood issues. And they created huge canals that was able to absorb the storm water and channel it for recreation and so on. So environment is everybody's business. Well, because at least we all attend Federal Executive Council. And if we don't attend, your boss do attend. It's your duty as a Nigerian to write a right memo that look on this issue, climate change, because it's affecting. In fact, Ministry of Education, I don't know if they are here, they equally have a role to play. When I was going to primary school, we used to have weather station in every primary school with hygrometer in Western region. I don't know about, it was there. We had a nature corner, you know, with thermometers, hygrometer, wind vane, everything. I know, Professor, at least, Madam, you will remember it was there in every school. And so when you ask for data of that particular city or that particular locality, you will get something. It might not be accurate, or, you know, the standard deviation might not be, you know, plus, minus, you know, whatever. But you will get data. It is missing. We don't do that anymore now. Our rivers had river gauges. My father was a civil servant in the Western region. I used to follow him around. It was there. So we need to go back to the basics. And we need to stop working in silos. We must break down the barriers. We must work together. Because environment has no boundary. And whatever happens in, even, you know, like when we had the Eket oil spill, Kwaibo terminal, instead of going towards Cameroon, it came towards Lagos. And the 25-year prediction that we did, oil simulation said when there's a spill in this terminal, it will flow through to Cameroon. But it defied all logic, all natural forces, and came straight and started traveling towards Lagos. So synergy is key. Everybody's business. We need to catch them young, so Ministry of Education should be in young. We need food, so we need to know how to do smart farming, green farming, urban farming. We need how to do it. Space is a challenge all over the world. Land is a challenge all over the world. We must know how to exploit it in a sustainable manner and maximize output. Then my brother was talking of that I mentioned only 4 principles. Please pardon me. There are many, many principles. I could see the body language of everybody that they were a bit tired. law of diminishing return. So I have to introduce some humor and then do not speak too much grammar. As a former teacher, I need to look at people's face. So thank you, sir. Then I don't know who is in charge of awareness raising. It's everybody's business, including you. And let me remind you, environment is on the concurrent list in the Constitution. So the states have a role, the local government have a role, everybody has a role, the federal government has a role. So thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for those questions. I do not expect to have this kind of discussion without a question. So let me start from the registrar. Whether federal or state or local government, government is government. You know, there are two people, the government and the governed. So I really don't want to bother myself much about which level of government did that. What is important is that something went wrong and then we need to address it. So that's that about that. Then, Doctor, I did not say that Land Use Act made provision for community right. What I said is that there is no section of the Land Use Act that prohibits community from owning land. So, but I'm not saying that we could have a reform because, I mean, you have a customary right of occupancy, which of course I think you should take care of things like that. So strengthening or reforming can also be made to strengthen some of those things. Then the gentleman here, my colleague, who mentioned that I did not talk much about the procedure involving compensation. With all due respect, I don't think I have any reason to go, because that is a very huge topic. But let me say this, that the Land Use Act, fine, is sacrosanct, but the law also made provision for policies that will give you room to administer land the way it will give succor to your people. For example, now in Lagos, if we do acquisition, we pay the community by giving them excision. We excise lands to them for development, for community expansion. And for people who owns land, buildings, we pay them, in line with the dictate of the act. So you can see that we are taking care of both sides. I'm not saying we are it's better or whatever, but at least something is being done. And I think in Lagos, we are the first people to start what we call excision, So sometimes we all believe that monetary compensation is the only form of compensation. No. It's not the only form of compensation. Resettlement, we do that. We resettle people, we even build houses for them. Now, there is a place in Lagos called the Okobaba. Indeed, since I was in secondary school, I've been seeing people writing about Okobaba. But I tell you, about 14 years ago, Lagos State government acquired a large tract of land in a place called Agbowa area. They bought land from families and then build houses, build schools, hospitals, and build sawmills just to move those people from Okobaba to Agbowa. But people went to court to say they don't want to go because they want to be in the heart of Lagos. But the question is, most of these people are not Lagosians. The Lagosians are complaining that you took our land to give to them. So sometimes we don't need to put sentiments. We just have to do what we need to do as government, but be sure that you put transparency in it. Like I said, remove transparency from your land administration, there is nothing there, it's carcass. So the last one, I think I've finished. Thank you.
We thank our resource persons, paper presenters, and all the participants for this wonderful session. When we return from lunch, the next paper presenter is Professor Mohammed Al-Amin, the former MD, Federal Housing Authority. We appreciate him when he comes. We're already on seat. You're welcome, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think, all right.
I want to thank every one of us for the wonderful presentation and the wonderful listening. And I can say authoritatively, even though the minister is not here present, in view of the presentation by our resource personnel, the issue of mentioning of technology and land administration, caution should be considered. We discussed with Prof. Kemiki yesterday about application of technology to valuation. If we are not careful as estate surveyor and valuer, we will lose it out to speculators. I agree, we require technology based on what ESV Ojikudu has presented. I can tell you that the issue of LIS is very, very key and critical to land titling and registration. And I can assure you that the government, in partnership with the World Bank and state governments, is doing something about it. Example is Turkey. From our recent experience in Hiroshima, they had their cadastral rights pre the 1900, and they are good testimony to real land cadastra. We are working with them, with the World Bank, to getting a very wonderful land cadastra in Nigeria. In the last 5 years, the Surveyor General presented some documents to us and figures about mapping the Nigerian land space. I can tell you that there was a presidential approval long time ago that the Nigerian land space should be mapped, but we didn't follow up. But it's still an issue affecting land titling. I think as we speak now, the National Population Commission, we were told from Washington that they've done a lot of work on this, especially for the housing data. The NRC just told me this afternoon that they have done about 65 million housing information, and they are willing to share the document with us. Last month, the minister launched and commissioned the National Housing Data Committee, and they are really working very, very hard. As we speak, we are working with the NMRC, the MPC, and other major stakeholders, trying to build a national housing data information. And we are advocating From what Mrs. Odetero said, a national data sharing and peering formula policy that is all encompassing. We are collaborating as we speak with different stakeholders. World Bank is driving it. At some point, we organize a seminar or workshop in that aspect. I can tell you for free that a mission from the World Bank is coming to Nigeria next month to look at our land administration processes and how to better it all for us. The key thing is we are building resounding policy reform. And this is part of the engagement that will transform and change the face of land administration. That has to do with titling, registration, and cadastral. Bringing all of these people together and practitioners in a very good relationship that we can have transparent system, because she mentioned that all that is required of us is discipline amongst ourselves and being transparent. Mr. Ojikudu mentioned that the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road Highway, that due process should be followed in terms of acquisition and compensation. I can tell you for free as we speak, the ministry has received a lot of complaints of undervaluation. And we have taken it up with the Ministry of Works on this issue. We are expecting their reply. Where we didn't follow due process, challenges will come onto us, and we will still come here and complain. We are to advise our principals, no matter whose all is God, the process and standard of land administration process. We can't say as a federal government we have succeeded, or as Lagos State government or other states you have succeeded. It's a cumulative of all of these processes that will make us succeed as a nation. We can take a cue from Victoria in Australia. They did well. Bogota in Colombia, they did well. Singapore, they did well. They had shared all of their experiences with us. I think I've shared some of them with our colleagues when I came back from Hiroshima. We can do all of this and better the lot of land administration. The registrar of title, you have always advocating for transparency. It's a good thing. We will achieve that. If only we work together as a team, we will surely make land administration better. Between me and you, I can tell you for free, our land administration process, as it is now, is far below compared to global best practices. It's for us to map out strategy on a stage 1, 2, 3 basis, and to encourage ourselves where we have started, where we aim to go, and what we have achieved. But I'm quite sure in the next 2-3 months, something will happen to change the face of land administration in Nigeria. But it is a process. Thank you very much. On this note, I would like to declare this session closed for lunch. Let's have a beautiful lunch. Then we come back to finalize other programs we have in stock for you. Thank you, sir.
is we want to crave the indulgence of every one of us to allow the delegate first, and other officers can join.